The world changes at 6:17 a.m. Phones vibrate in kitchens, buses, bedrooms, and guard towers. The alert tone is identical everywhere. Stripped of melody, designed to cut through sleep. Screens glow with the same instruction to remain calm. Outside, dawn hesitates, a pale blue held back by low cloud. For a breath, nothing moves. Then the quiet swallows the sound of the alert, and the day begins without permission. In a suburban street, Sarah stands barefoot on cold tile, coffee cooling in her hand. She works night shifts at a regional power control room and is used to alarms that mean something precise. This one does not. It says little and implies everything. Across the city, Malik pauses at a bus stop, briefcase balanced on his knee, tie half knotted. He teaches history, the kind that ends, never the kind that begins. In a downtown newsroom, Elena stares at a monitor as producers stop speaking at once. The studio clock keeps counting. It always does. At 6:20 a.m., the machines respond faster than people. Trading algorithms halt without commentary. Airport gates freeze open. Boarding passes useless in warm hands. Trains coast to a careful stop between stations, doors sealed, lights humming. Traffic signals blink red, then surrender to darkness. Radios flip to emergency carriers and find only a measured voice repeating that more information will follow. It does not say when. Sarah's control room fills with a low, nervous hum. Engineers log in remotely. Faces pixelated, voices clipped. Load forecast spike and collapse in minutes. She watches the city's appetite for electricity tremble, then steady, as if the grid itself is holding its breath. Malik's bus never arrives. The street remains orderly, but the order feels rehearsed. Elena's phone vibrates again, then again, a cascade of tips without sources. She deletes nothing. She saves everything. By 7 a.m., the first denial settles in. Schools unlock their doors. Offices raise their blinds. The language of routine moves people forward when certainty will not. Sarah drives home through intersections that require eye contact and trust. Horns do not sound. Malik walks instead, counting steps, a habit he learned to quiet his thoughts. Elena goes on air with careful words and careful pauses, promising context she does not have. Viewers watch for tone more than facts. At 8 a.m., shells begin to thin. It is quiet work, practiced and polite. Cans disappear before voices rise. Bread goes first, then water, then batteries that were never meant to matter. Cards still swipe. Cash still counts. The systems are intact enough to make the choices feel voluntary. Outside, highways empty as if drained, ramps guarded by blinking amber lights. Overhead, the sky carries no contrails. By mid-morning, information fractures. Maps appear on screens with arrows and colors that mean different things in different places. Official accounts speak slowly, confirming nothing, denying nothing. Rumors sprint. Screenshots replace sources. Elena fields calls from people who know someone who heard something. She asks for time and hears her own voice then. Malik scrolls through messages from students asking if class is canceled, if borders are closing, if history is happening now. He types, deletes, and types again. At 10 a.m., the power flickers. Just once. Enough to notice. Enough to change the room. Sarah's phone rings with a request to report back early. She sits on her couch and listens to the refrigerator resume its steady thrum. The sound suddenly precious. Across the city, elevators stop between floors, then start again. Hospitals test generators without explanation. The hum of electricity becomes audible, like a heartbeat placed too close to the ear. Near noon, the first statements arrive. Leaders appear framed by flags and neutral backdrops, voices even, eyes tired. They speak of posture and readiness, of coordination and restraint. They avoid the word that ends arguments. Elena listens for what is not said and writes it down. Malik watches with his students' faces in mind, wondering which chapter this belongs to. Sarah pulls on her jacket and heads back toward the grid. Outside, the light feels colder. Sirens do not wail. Planes do not pass. The city remains standing, but it no longer leans forward. At 12:04 p.m., an internal memo crosses Elena's screen, marked urgent and quiet. She reads it twice, then once more to be sure. It is not for broadcast. Not yet. She closes her eyes, breathes, and looks back at the camera, understanding that the day has already crossed a line it will not uncross. The control room smells faintly of metal and burnt coffee when Sarah arrives. Screen stacked demand against capacity, numbers breathing in green and amber. A supervisor speaks about contingencies without naming the cause. Everyone understands the math. Fewer margins mean fewer mistakes allowed. Malik reaches the campus gates and finds them open but unwatched, a bell ringing to empty air. He sits on a bench and remembers lectures about miscalculation, how wars begin with misread signals. Elena's producer counts down with fingers, not voice. At 12:30 p.m., networks strain again. Calls drop mid-sentence. Messages queue and arrive late. The radio returns with a longer loop. Calm instructions to conserve resources and await updates. Sarah watches a neighborhood dim by design. Malik receives an email advising faculty to suspend travel. Elena rereads the internal memo. It mentions exercises becoming operations. Thresholds reconsidered, silence strategic. The city absorbs this without spectacle. Cafes close early. Couriers turn back. People freeze mid-step to listen to nothing, then move on. Evening approaches too soon. The conflict, still unnamed, presses inward, turning ordinary choices into signals. Sarah logs a change she will not explain. Malik pockets his phone and looks up at a sky that refuses to clarify. Elena keeps her voice level, knowing composure is now infrastructure. And somewhere between noon and afternoon, without sound or ceremony, the day stops being temporary. Nothing about tomorrow feels promised, and that knowledge settles. The silence holds, teaching everyone how fragile the ordinary has always been until now. The afternoon advances without urgency, yet everything accelerates beneath the surface. At 1 p.m., offices thin as managers send careful emails about flexibility and caution. The language is gentle, the implication severe. Sarah monitors load curves flattening as factories pause and households conserve. Malik walks home through streets that feel wider, sound dampened, footsteps distinct. Elena listens to foreign correspondents describe the same restraint everywhere. The war, still unnamed, expresses itself through subtraction. Less movement, less speech, less certainty. Each reduction feels temporary until it doesn't. Time stretches, and nobody trusts the clock anymore. The moment lingers, unresolved. Everywhere now. By mid-afternoon, borders quietly harden. Airspace closures ripple outward like a hell breath released too fast. Elena watches flight trackers empty, icons vanishing until oceans look untouched again. Malik checks his passport home, surprised by its sudden weightlessness. Sarah hears a supervisor mention coordination calls that exclude civilian grids. It is said casually, as if a mission were technical. Fuel stations post limits without argument. Shipping lanes slow. The planet behaves like a house, securing doors before a storm that has not announced itself. Preparation replaces prediction, and certainty becomes impolite. No one asks why, only how long. For now, at 3 p.m., money hesitates. ATMs impose ceilings that feel arbitrary until they don't. Markets remain frozen, not crashed, as if restrained by a hand everyone senses but cannot see. Elena fields calls from economists, speaking in metaphors about valves and pressure. Malik stands in a grocery line that moves politely, slowly, everyone calculating without speaking. Sarah logged a request to shed non-essential load after sunset. She knows what non-essential means changes tonight. Daylight suddenly feels like borrowed time. Every purchase becomes a small decision about survival. Receipts are kept. People rehearse calm with remarkable discipline. It shows everywhere. Now, late afternoon light slants across the city, revealing details once ignored. Sirens remain silent, but the absence feels curated. Elena goes on air with leaders promising stability while urging preparedness. Words balance like glass. Malik listens from his apartment, windows open, hearing neighbors pack bags they may not use. Sarah supervises controlled dimming, block by block, watching neighborhoods soften into amber. Power becomes a conversation rather than a guarantee. Generators cough awake at hospitals and data centers. Elevators pause, then surrender. The hum deepens, intimate and insistent. Darkness waits patiently at the edges. Everyone senses its timing. Soon. Enough. At 6 p.m., statements arrive together, synchronized across continents. Faces appear composed, voices low. Sentences rehearsed to avoid sparks. Elena notices identical phrasing translated into many languages. Malik hears restraint framed as strength, patience as duty. Sarah receives confirmation that military demand will override civilian priorities if required. It is framed as contingency, not threat. The word war remains absent, hovering like a withheld diagnosis. Viewers search I for truth and find professionalism instead. Applause is discouraged, questions deferred. The broadcast ends without relief. Outside, the city exhales uneasily. Phones vibrate less, but heavier. Silence learns a rhythm. It spreads. Evening reorganizes behavior. Curfews appear as recommendations first, enforced by expectation rather than patrols. Highways drain completely, headlights turning back toward neighborhoods. Malik locks his door earlier than usual, checking twice. Elena's newsroom thins to essential staff. Conversations reduced to hand signals. Sarah prepares for peak stress as domestic usage spikes. Then drops. People cook together, conserving, listening to radios that crackle between official loops. The smell of food carries comfort and urgency. Windows glow unevenly across blocks. Dark rooms multiply without complaint. Generators punctuate the quiet with metallic coughs. Every sound feels accounted for. Nothing is casual anymore. Here, nightfall arrives unevenly, like a tide blocked by infrastructure. Entire districts dim to compliance, while others burn bright under priority status. Sarah authorizes another reduction, jaw tight, knowing tomorrow will demand more. Malik sits in darkness, phone face down, counting breaths. Elena watches international feeds go black one by one as correspondents lose links. The map on her screen grows sparse. Continents return to outlines. Time zones blur as nights synchronize. The planet feels smaller, tighter. Isolation replaces distance. Emergency frequencies dominate the airwaves with calm repetition. Instructions emphasize patience, conservation, unity. No one mentions duration. That omission matters greatly. By 10 p.m., fatigue competes with vigilance. Children sleep early, sensing gravity without explanation. Adults remain awake, scrolling until batteries dictate rest. Malik drafts a lecture he may never deliver, tracing patterns of escalation he once taught safely in hindsight. Sarah reviews contingency tables illuminated by backup power. Elena records a segment she will not air, cataloging absences rather than events. The newsroom smells of cold coffee and ozone. Words feel heavier when unsaid. The camera lens reflects a tired resolve. Outside, wind moves trash like punctuation. Streetlights flicker, then hold. Nothing feels finished. Everything feels provisional. Near midnight, silence asserts authority. Alerts stop. Updates stall. The absence of new instruction becomes the loudest signal. Sarah stares at stable lines and imagines a strain beyond them. Malik listens to his building settle, pipes clicking like nervous thoughts. Elena receives a message marked secure, requesting readiness before dawn. She does not reply immediately. Power grids hold, but margins thin audibly. Servers hum with military traffic. Satellites adjust their gaze. Somewhere, decisions are finalized without press releases. The sky remains indifferent. Stars obscured by cloud. Time stretches again. Sleep comes lightly, if at all. Waiting becomes work. For everyone. Approaching morning. The conflict clarifies by omission. No strikes reported. No victories claimed. Only systems poised and people braced. Sarah saves her work and prepares for a longer watch. Malik sets his alarm out of habit, unsure why. Elena finally replies, confirming availability. Feeling the weight of witness settle in, the world has shifted from shock to endurance, from questions to posture. Whatever comes next will not ask permission. It will arrive to planet already rearranged, quieter, ready in ways no one wanted. The night loosens its grip reluctantly. Something irreversible waits just beyond dawn. Everyone feels it. Coming. Midnight passes without ceremony, and the world does not exhale. At 12:07 a.m., emergency loops continue their calm insistence. Voices steady enough to sound rehearsed by history itself. Sarah sits before the grid, eyes adjusting to dim panels, measuring a civilization in amperes and restraint. Malik lies awake on his couch, shoes still on, listening to pipes and distant generators trade nervous replies. Elena watches feeds thin to skeletal updates, timestamps advancing, while facts refuse to follow. The conflict has matured into a condition. It occupies rooms without entering them. It waits. At 1:30 a.m., networks begin to fail quietly. Not everywhere, not at once. Pockets of silence bloom and connect. Elena notes the pattern, the way outages favor peripheries before approaching centers. Satellites reorient. Priority traffic supersedes curiosity. Sarah authorizes another rebalancing, shaving margins she once considered untouchable. Malik refreshes messages that no longer load, learning the texture of isolation by degrees. The modern world does not shatter. It thins. Each loss is small enough to rationalize, cumulative enough to matter. Night deepens with intent. By 3 a.m., the internet is no longer a place but a rumor. Radios carry clip directives and patient pauses. The air feels heavier, as if pressure has shifted indoors. Sarah hears a transformer fail miles away, a dull thud followed by absence. She compensates automatically, hands steady, pulse not. Malik opened a window and smells rain that never arrives. Elena drafts sentences that begin with caution and end with uncertainty, then deletes them all. The clock advances without permission, indifferent to readiness. Somewhere, thresholds are crossed without witnesses. Pre-dawn light gathers reluctantly, a gray promise behind cloud. At 5:20 a.m., supply realities surface. Distribution centers report delays described as weather. Pharmacies ration with apologetic smiles. Food deliveries reschedule indefinitely. Malik inventories his kitchen, discovering that abundance was always theoretical. Sarah receives a directive to prioritize hardened facilities through the morning surge. Elena hears from a correspondent whose city has gone dark entirely, voice steady until it isn't. Survival displaces identity without announcement. The future contracts to intervals measured in hours. Morning approaches, altered. At 6:17 a.m., exactly 1 day since the alert, the city wakes differently. Fewer cars start. Fewer lights answer switches. Birds sound louder against reduced machinery. Elena goes live with a voice trained to hold weight without cracking. She speaks of coordination, resilience, and ongoing assessment, words chosen to avoid finality. Malik walks outside, streets open but subdued, neighbors exchanging nods instead of greetings. Sarah watches the morning load rise and meets it with less to give. The grid holds, barely, and that barely becomes a headline no one prints. By mid-morning, acceptance replaces fear. It is not relief. It is posture. People adapt their movements, their expectations, their voices. Lines form where information might arrive. Children ask fewer questions. Adults answer carefully. Elena notices viewers responding to silence more than sound, the pauses doing the work. Malik volunteers at a local center distributing supplies, surprised by the absence of conflict. Scarcity organizes behavior, without spectacle. Sarah approves a schedule that assumes weeks, not days. Planning becomes a form of mourning and also of care. At noon, governments speak again, synchronized and spare. They confirm what everyone already feels without naming it. Defensive measures are active. Escalation is managed. Communication may be intermittent. The word war remains absent, but its silhouette sharpens. Elena listens for verbs and finds only nouns. Malik hears history being written in the passive voice. Sarah logs the briefing time and notes the omissions. Outside, flags hang motionless, symbols awaiting instruction. The sun climbs and offers no guidance. The conflict persists by design. Afternoon reveals consequences. Medical facilities postpone elective care indefinitely. Schools announce remote options that assume connectivity. Courts adjourn. Flights remain grounded. The economy does not collapse. It rearranges itself around necessity. Elena's newsroom becomes a relay station for restraint. Malik returns home carrying fewer assumptions. Sarah executes another control reduction, watching neighborhoods consent to darkness with remarkable grace. The national heartbeat slows audibly, each thump farther apart, each pause longer. The planet practices endurance. Before midnight returns again, small rituals harden into habits. People tape lists beside doors, charge devices from shared outlets, memorize broadcast schedules. Malik writes names of neighbors on paper, a network built without screens. Sarah annotates contingencies by hand, ink grounding thought. Elena records ambient sound for context, knowing silence will be evidence. None of this stops the conflict. It merely gives shape to waiting, transforming anxiety into procedure, and procedure into something resembling resolve. In these motions, control is rehearsed, if not restored, against a widening unknown. Near nightfall, a secure notice reaches the newsroom. It is brief, technical, unmistakable. Elena reads it once, then again, feeling the room tilt. It confirms a shift from readiness to execution, words arranged to avoid alarm. She looks at the camera and understands the responsibility has changed. Malik receives a message advising shelter after dark. Sarah sees new demand patterns emerge, sharp and non-negotiable. The system recalibrates around priorities that do not include comfort. Darkness settles with purpose. Streets empty without instruction. Windows dim to compliance. The world feels smaller than yesterday and larger than fear. Sarah stays on watch, hands steady as margins vanish. Malik listens to his building breathe, a collective organism adapting. Elena prepares to speak without saying the word everyone knows. The conflict has not detonated. It has entrenched. And as the night closes in, the planet understands this is no longer a moment to endure, but a condition to inhabit. Morning arrives without relief, only illumination. The city wakes into rules it never voted for, streets quieter, gestures smaller. Sarah greets the grid like a patient that survived surgery, stable yet fragile. Malik steps outside and feels watched by absence. Doors close, shops dark. Elena reads overnight directives and senses authority narrowing. The conflict persists as maintenance, not drama. Each system holds because people comply. Compliance becomes character. The sun rises higher, revealing a world intact enough to demand anticipation, damaged enough to punish mistakes. Nothing here feels temporary, and everyone senses endurance replacing hope today, quietly now everywhere again. By late morning, procedures harden. Sarah approves schedules assuming ration weeks, not emergency days, learning to speak scarcely fluently. Malik volunteers again, distributing information more than food, discovering trust circulates faster than supplies. Elena coordinates broadcast time to generator cycles. Sentences trimmed for power budgets. Silence becomes strategic. Pause is carrying reassurance. The conflict reshapes time, stretching hours, compressing futures. People adapt posture, conserving energy, voices light. The city behaves like a held breath. Everyone participates. Everyone calculates. Nothing moves accidentally now, and intention itself becomes visible. Ordinary choices acquire consequence, teaching patience, restraint, and shared vulnerability daily without ceremony anywhere. Afternoon light flattens shadows, exposing adjustments made permanent. Sarah notices demand patterns stabilize at lower baselines. Proof behavior has shifted. Malik watches neighbors trade skills, not money, an economy improvising quietly. Elena edits footage of calm streets. Understanding tranquility can be evidence of pressure. The conflict colonizes routine, turning meals into planning sessions, walks into reconnaissance. Children mirror restraint instinctively. The absence of panic becomes eerie. The steadiness feels earned, but brittle, maintained by faith that restraint will be reciprocated somewhere unseen. Everyone senses the balance could collapse with one careless signal or misunderstood silence from anywhere tonight at all. Mid-afternoon announcements confirm extensions, not endings. Sarah reads technical bulletins that translate into longer vigilance. Malik hears civic leaders emphasize cooperation without timelines, phrases smoothing uncertainty. Elena notes identical talking points migrating across languages, a choreography of reassurance. The conflict advances through administration, permits, advisories. No sirens interrupt. Instead, calendars fill with contingencies. The city internalizes governance, neighbors enforcing guidelines politely. Authority diffuses. Responsibility thickens. Everyone becomes an operator of stability, managing fear through adherence and habit alone. This collective discipline feels protective. Yet everyone wonders who absorbs the cost when discipline fails under unseen pressures daily, without complaint now. Toward evening, strain shows subtly. Sarah hears fatigue in voices on coordination calls, mistakes narrowly avoided. Malik feels patience thinning as queues lengthen, civility tested by scarcity. Elena watches audience metrics flatten, attention dulled by endurance. The conflict evolves from novelty into burden. Adaptation costs accumulate. Bodies remember stress. Sleep fragments. The city slows further, conserving effort. Yet solidarity persists, an unspoken agreement to endure quietly. This phase feels heavier than fear, because it offers no adrenaline, only obligation and time. People begin measuring resilience not by courage, but by consistency across days that blend together now for everyone everywhere. Night returns carrying instructions refined by experience. Sarah authorizes deeper reductions. Confident cooperation will hold. Malik attends a community briefing lit by lanterns, voices calm, expectations modest. Elena prepares a broadcast acknowledging hardship, without forecasting relief. The conflict settles into infrastructure, shaping nights more than days. Darkness teaches limits kindly, forcing rest. Generators punctuate silence with mechanical breaths. The city learns new rhythms, slower, synchronized. Fear recedes, replaced by resolve that surprises even its holders, fragile yet persistent. This adaptation feels like victory to some, surrender to others, and necessity to most under prolonged strain everywhere tonight again now globally. Overnight, rumors flare then fade, lacking fuel. Sarah ignores speculation, trusting instruments over whispers. Malik hears distant sirens once, then silence, heart rate spiking then settling. Elena cross-checks reports that lead nowhere, the absence itself instructive. The conflict resists narrative climax, preferring attrition. Attention drifts, then returns sharpened. People discover endurance requires boredom. The city sleeps in segments, minds half awake. Waiting becomes a primary labor, unpaid and universal. In this suspended state, identity loosens, replaced by roles defined by need, proximity, and reliability. These roles feel temporary, yet repetition grants them weight quickly across households and blocks everywhere now. Morning returns muted. Sarah reviews overnight stability and notes how little margin remains. Malik wakes rested but wary, routines adjusted. Elena receives clearance to acknowledge escalation without naming triggers. The conflict demands language that steadies without revealing. Trust becomes currency. Institutions spend it carefully. Streets fill briefly, purposefully, then empty again. The city practices presence without congregation. Life continues inside boundaries newly understood. Progress is measured by what does not break. Everyone learns to value continuity over ambition. Hope persists quietly, reframed as maintenance rather than expectation, surviving through repetition shared by neighbors, strangers, institutions alike during this phase now. By afternoon, confirmation arrives indirectly. Sarah notices military loads spike and remain. Malik hears aircraft overhead. Unseen, sound brief but unmistakable. Elena receives a revised protocol prioritizing continuity during operations. The conflict steps closer, without spectacle. It does not ask consent. It assumes readiness. The city absorbs this, tightening routines further. Windows darken earlier. Conversations shorten. Preparation becomes normalized. Anxiety stabilizes into focus. The shift feels permanent, a door closing softly behind everyone. No alarms announce it, yet collective intuition recognizes escalation, registering change through sound, absence, and timing experienced simultaneously across regions tonight without confirmation or debate anywhere now. Evening settles heavier than before. Sarah remains on duty, eyes steady as capacity thins. Malik prepares a space for extended shelter, movements deliberate. Elena steps before the camera, aware the next sentence changes expectations. She speaks calmly, describing measures activated globally, emphasizing resilience. The word war remains unspoken, yet its gravity fills the pauses. Outside, the city stills in compliance. The conflict has crossed from anticipation into presence. As night approaches again, everyone senses the threshold past and wonders what tomorrow will require. No answers arrive, only the weight of continuity pressing forward relentlessly through darkness and resolve everywhere now. Morning arrives heavier than before, not darker but denser, as if gravity itself has been adjusted. Sarah stands at the control console, shoulders squared, reading stability reports that describe fragility with mathematical politeness. Malik wakes to the sound of trucks repositioning barriers, rubber against asphalt, a language he understands without instruction. Elena reviews overnight footage and senses a pivot, subtle but unmistakable, like a tide turning before waves appear. The conflict now asserts routine authority. It no longer asks adaptation. It assumes it. By mid-morning, movement is permitted but purposeful. Streets fill briefly, then empty by design. Sarah approves a controlled islanding test, separating districts to protect the whole. Malik helps neighbors mark shared resources, chalk lines on pavement becoming quiet agreements. Elena narrates restraint as civic strength, choosing words that reduce panic without erasing truth. The city behaves like a machine taught empathy, efficient yet careful. Every action leaves a trace of intention. The air hums with cooperation strained thin. Late morning brings confirmation through consequence. Mobile service drops to priority tiers. Sarah notices civilian data throttled beneath encrypted traffic. Malik's messages stall, then fail, teaching patience through absence. Elena receives a directive limiting live footage near infrastructure, justification implied rather than stated. The conflict clarifies by subtraction. Access narrows. Vision tunnels. People feel guided without seeing hands. The adjustment feels permanent enough to plan around, temporary enough to hope against. At noon, a briefing airs globally. Leaders speak less, listen more, and answer questions with structure instead of substance. Elena notes a change in cadence, slower, weightier. Malik hears neighbors pause conversations to listen, collective attention forming a pulse. Sarah logs a moment when emergency authority extends indefinitely. A checkbox clicked somewhere else. The sun stands high, indifferent. Shadows shorten. The city accepts longer timeline silently. Afternoon heat reveals fatigue. Sarah corrects a near miss caused by human error, the first in days. Malik snaps at a volunteer, then apologizes immediately, shame sharper than anger. Elena records a voiceover acknowledging strain, letting silence carry meaning. The conflict extracts payment in small increments. Endurance demands self-regulation. Communities respond by simplifying further. Meals shared, tasks rotated, expectations lowered. The rhythm steadies again, but the cost registers in faces and posture. As evening approaches, the soundscape changes. Distant aircraft pass overhead, unseen, brief, undeniable. Sarah watches demand spike in hardened facilities and remain elevated. Malik feels a vibration through walls, a reminder of scale beyond neighborhoods. Elena receives clearance to reference operations without imagery, language abstracted for safety. The conflict sheds its subtlety. Presence replaces suggestion. The city responds by compressing itself inward, conserving light and motion. Night settles earlier now, either by policy or instinct. Sarah oversees another reduction, trusting compliance learned over days. Malik attends a candlelit meeting where plans are made for longer shelter, voices calm, eyes serious. Elena broadcasts a message emphasizing continuity through uncertainty, her tone measured, almost intimate. Darkness feels instructed, not accidental. The grid holds. People hold. The space between feels fragile but shared. Overnight, a new pattern emerges. Alerts resume, fewer but firmer, outlining behavioral expectations rather than threats. Sarah updates protocols accordingly. Fingers steady. Malik memorizes schedules posted on doors, analog redundancy gaining value. Elena notices viewership spike briefly, then settle, curiosity yielding to acceptance. The conflict now communicates in constraints. Boundaries replace warnings. Obedience becomes cooperation, framed as mutual protection. Morning returns with altered light, filtered through smoke far away. Not enough to alarm, enough to notice. Sarah reads reports of distant disruptions, contained, unnamed. Malik smells the air and understands distance no longer guarantees separation. Elena prepares language acknowledging events without specifics. Trust balanced against necessity. The city absorbs another adjustment, routines bending but not breaking. The emotional arc shifts from endurance toward resolve. By midday, the central truth surfaces quietly. This is not a phase awaiting reversal. It is a structure forming around life. Sarah commits to long-term grid partitioning. Malik stores teaching materials he may never use. Elena archives footage knowing history has entered a new chapter without a title. The conflict has matured into environment. People live inside it now. Across the city, small confirmations accumulate, invisible yet decisive. Utility crews reroute lines by hand, trusting maps memorized under stress. Store owners rewrite prices in pencil, anticipating change without panic. Malik notices how greetings have become brief inventories of safety rather than pleasantries. Sarah signs off on a regional drill that quietly converts into standard operating procedure. Elena interviews experts who speak in conditional verbs, their caution louder than conclusions. The conflict educates through repetition, teaching what matters by removing what does not. Patience sharpens. Humor fades. Attention narrows to essentials. Nightly routines ossify into doctrine. Children learn new boundaries quickly, absorbing limits adults debate internally. Communities stop asking when and start asking how. The city's posture shifts from waiting to stewardship, preserving function under pressure. This stewardship carries weight, responsibility distributed across strangers. Mistakes feel personal. Success feels collective. The absence of spectacle becomes proof of effort. Every held line represents countless unseen decisions. Resilience stops being inspirational and becomes mandatory. The emotional temperature cools, not from relief, but from focus. Fear is managed, not cured. The conflict's true shape emerges as duration, not destruction. People sense they are being tested less by violence than by time. Endurance reveals character slowly, relentlessly. In this realization, something settles heavy but stabilizing, like a foundation poured while the building is already occupied. It reminds them that stability is built quietly, maintained collectively, and tested daily, long before headlines confirm what lives have already learned through repetition, restraint, and sheer resolve under pressure everywhere now together standing. As evening falls again, the city moves with practiced restraint. Lights dim. Conversations soften. Sarah remains on watch. Malik remains available. Elena remains composed. None of them expect closure. They expect continuity under pressure. The night carries fewer questions, more obligations. Somewhere beyond sight, decisions continue. And as darkness completes its circuit, everyone senses tomorrow will not explain today, only extend it.